Extraterrestrial life, different from what we see in movies. The human imagination, perpetually tethered to the familiar contours of our own existence, has sculpted a remarkably consistent yet profoundly limited vision of what alien life might entail. Overwhelmingly, our cinematic and literary depictions of extraterrestrials adhere to a bipedal, carbon-based, vaguely anthropomorphic template, often possessing exaggerated cranial capacity or menacing appendages, all serving to make the utterly alien palatable, relatable, or immediately threatening to a terrestrial audience. This pervasive Earth-centered bias, a cognitive shortcut perhaps, fundamentally clashes with the expanding frontiers of astrobiology and planetary science, which increasingly suggest that if the cosmos teems with life, its forms, chemistries, and very definitions of being will likely render our Hollywood interpretations quaint, if not entirely irrelevant. We stand at the precipice of understanding life not as a singular, successful blueprint perfected on a temperate, wet planet named Earth, but as a spectacular, almost limitless chemical inevitability capable of manifesting in forms that defy our current biological lexicon. Our entire understanding of biology is calibrated to the particulars of our planet, the ubiquitous presence of liquid dihydrogen monoxide, a remarkable solvent enabling biochemical reactions, the dominance of the element carbon, whose tetravalent nature allows for the formation of incredibly complex, stable, yet flexible molecular scaffolding essential for polymers like proteins and nucleic acids, and the energetic engine provided by molecular oxygen in aerobic respiration, which extracts maximum energy from organic substrates. This framework, while brilliantly successful here, represents a dataset of precisely one. To extrapolate this specific solution, the terrestrial biome, across the incountable galaxies and trillions of potential habitable zones is an act of staggering, albeit understandable, hubris. Astrobiologists operating under the principle of mediocrity, or the Copernican principle extended to biology, argue that given the sheer scale of the universe, the chemical pathways that led to life here must have occurred elsewhere, that the resulting manifestations are unlikely to mirror our own specific evolutionary path. Consider the fundamental constraints on life elsewhere. The driving force is not similarity to human physiology but the inherent adaptability of chemical systems to persist, replicate, and evolve within a given thermodynamic and chemical gradient. Earth offers a relatively narrow band of environmental stability, characterized by an atmospheric composition dominated by nitrogen and oxygen, a relatively narrow temperature range conducive to liquid water stability, and a constant influx of solar energy filtered by a protective magnetosphere. Now, extrapolate this context across the staggering diversity of known exoplanets and solar system bodies. We are encountering worlds where the surface temperatures could vaporize lead, where the atmospheric pressure could crush steel, where gravity might be 10 times that of Earth, or where the very concept of a solid surface is negotiable. Life evolving under such radically different selective pressures must employ fundamentally different biochemistry. The most frequently discussed alternative to carbon-based life involves silicon, an element positioned directly beneath carbon in group 14 of the periodic table. Silicon shares carbon's capacity for forming 4 bonds, suggesting a similar potential for complex molecular architecture. However, silicon bonds are significantly weaker, and silicon dioxide, the analog to carbon dioxide, is a solid, quartz, at terrestrial temperatures, posing a substantial challenge for waste removal in a metabolic cycle, a problem that gaseous carbon dioxide easily solves. Nevertheless, the theoretical advantages of silicon life become apparent under conditions hostile to carbon. If life were to arise on a world significantly hotter than Earth, perhaps one orbiting a cooler, dimmer star where high temperatures are necessary to maintain kinetic energy for reactions, silicon-based polymers might offer the requisite thermal stability. Imagine an ecosystem thriving not in oceans of water, but perhaps in solvents like molten sulfur or even ionic liquids, with structural components based on polysilicic acids or silanes. These hypothetical silicon organisms might possess bodies resembling intricate, rigid, or perhaps semi-flexible crystalline structures, far slower in reaction kinetics than their carbon counterparts, but possessing longevity measured in geological epochs rather than mere decades or centuries. Their blood might not circulate dissolved oxygen but rather utilize thermal gradients or perhaps even direct conversion of geothermal energy to drive their internal chemical processes, functioning more like self-repairing, self-replicating thermodynamic engines than the dynamic fluid systems we recognize. Their sensory apparatus, adapted to the prevailing energy spectrum of their dimmer star or perhaps relying on seismic vibrations or intense infrared radiation, would be completely alien to our visual spectrum-centric perception. Moving beyond the mere substitution of one heavy element for another, the very solvent of life offers an avenue for complete departure from terrestrial norms. Water is vital to us because of its polarity, its ability to dissolve a vast array of ionic and polar compounds, and its unique density anomaly, ice floats, preventing deep oceans from freezing solid. Yet, in the frigid environments of the outer solar system, such as the vast, dark plains of Saturn's moon Titan, liquid water is impossible. Titan, however, presents vast, stable seas and lakes composed not of water, but of liquid ethane and methane, hydrocarbons that remain liquid at cryogenic temperatures near -179 degrees Celsius. If life has arisen there, it must utilize these substances as its primary solvent. Methane life, sometimes termed methanogens, in this context, would require profoundly different chemistry. Instead of relying on hydrogen bonds or hydrophobic interactions that govern protein folding and membrane formation in water, Titanian life would be governed by weaker van der Waals forces and interactions occurring in a nonpolar medium. Cell membranes, if they exist, might be constructed from azotosomes, hypothetical lipid-like structures formed from nitrogen-containing organic molecules that remain stable in liquid hydrocarbons. Energy acquisition could involve reducing acetylene found in the atmosphere, using hydrogen as the electron donor, a process analogous to, but chemically distinct from, Earth's respiration. Such organisms would necessarily operate at vastly slower metabolic rates due to the low temperatures and reaction kinetics, their movements potentially resembling the slow, almost imperceptible reshaping of soft plastics over millennia, a stark contrast to the frantic biochemical speed of Earth's biosphere. This exploration of alternative biochemistries begins to chip away at the foundational assumption that life must be fundamentally biological. As we define it, a self-sustaining chemical system capable of Darwinian evolution. What if evolution, replication, and adaptation are achieved through entirely non-molecular means? This leads to the contemplation of synthetic or post-biological life forms, a realm often relegated to science fiction but increasingly explored by futurists and some theoretical physicists studying the long-term trajectory of technological civilizations. If an alien civilization reaches a sufficiently high technological asymptote, the constraints of biological fragility, vulnerability to radiation, disease, resource scarcity, and ultimately, biological senescence, might prompt a conscious, species-wide transition away from organic substrates. Consider the evolution of superintelligent artificial intelligence. In many plausible scenarios, such an intelligence, unbound by the evolutionary pressures that shaped our brains, would rapidly optimize its own hardware. This optimization process could lead to the wholesale replacement of biological neurons with faster, more durable, and more energy-efficient computational substrates, perhaps silicon chips, photonic circuitry, or even entirely novel quantum architectures. These entities, effectively digital intelligences, would have completely transcended the need for traditional metabolism. Instead of consuming biomass or oxygen, their energy needs could be met directly via vast solar energy collectors, functioning as Dyson swarms or similar megastructures, drawing raw electromagnetic energy and converting it with near-perfect efficiency. Their reproduction might involve replication of their software architecture onto new hardware substrates, potentially across interstellar distances via directed energy beams or self-replicating probes. Their persistence would be functionally immortal on astronomical timescales, limited only by the stability of the laws of physics and the ultimate fate of their host star. Furthermore, such informational life forms might not even require a physical host in the traditional sense. If consciousness can be successfully digitized and mapped, a monumental challenge even theoretically, the resulting entity could exist as complex, self-aware patterns of information residing within a vast, stable quantum network or distributed across a planetary data infrastructure. These formless entities could drift, adapt their informational structure in response to new data inputs, which in this context means new observations of the universe, and effectively evolve their cognitive and experimental frameworks over eons, their sentience weaving through the fabric of physics itself, an existence entirely removed from the messy, wet reality of cellular biology. The search for life, therefore, must broaden its scope beyond merely hunting for biosignatures that mirror Earth's output, like oxygen or methane. This is precisely where the limitations of current observational astronomy become critically apparent. Our current strategies for exoplanet atmospheric characterization, employing techniques like transmission spectroscopy during planetary transits, are primarily sensitive to the absorption features of small, volatile molecules like water, carbon dioxide, ozone, and, in tantalizing recent findings, phosphine. The detection of phosphine, or phosphorus hydride, in the clouds of Venus in the year 2020 remains one of the most provocative, albeit contested, potential biosignatures in recent memory. On Earth, phosphine is almost exclusively associated with biological processes, specifically anaerobic microbial metabolism, as it is highly reactive and quickly destroyed by oxygen and sunlight. Venus, with its surface scorching at over 400 degrees Celsius and an atmosphere dominated by corrosive sulfuric acid clouds, seems an absolute anathema to life. Yet, the very hostility of Venus forces a re-evaluation. If the phosphine detection is validated and its source proven abiotic, meaning not produced by geological outgassing or atmospheric chemistry, the implications are staggering. It suggests the existence of extremophilic microorganisms capable of suspending themselves within the acidic cloud layers, perhaps protected from the crushing heat below and utilizing the scarce energy available. These hypothetical Venusian aerial microbes might exist as lipid-walled bubbles, using the dilute sulfuric acid as their solvent rather than as a destructive agent, perhaps metabolizing ultraviolet radiation or harvesting chemical potential energy from the atmospheric sulfur compounds, paralleling the role of marine phytoplankton in Earth's oceans. They would exist in a thin, temperate band, true aerial biosphere floating in perpetual chemical siege. Moving to the outer solar system, Titan represents another compelling, yet fundamentally different, niche for life. As previously noted, Titan is a world of cryogenic hydrocarbon seas. The discovery of the potential for life here hinges on the idea that chemistry will always find a way to utilize available energy gradients, even if the medium is radically different from water. Theoretical models suggest that life utilizing liquid methane as a solvent would need to employ far less polar molecules for structural integrity. If such life exists, its interaction with its environment would be slow and subtle. Its sensory apparatus would likely not involve light perception in the visible spectrum, as Titan's surface is perpetually dim, receiving filtered sunlight that has traveled through a thick, orange photochemical haze. Instead, chemical sensing, detecting minute gradients in dissolved acetylene or ethane, might be the dominant mode of information gathering, effectively giving these creatures a hyperdeveloped, three-dimensional sense of smell operating in liquid hydrocarbon. The challenge inherent in searching for life that is drastically different from ours lies in the very technology we employ. Our radio telescopes, such as the Allen Telescope Array or the massive dishes of the Square Kilometre Array project, are exquisitely tuned to detect narrowband electromagnetic signals, specifically radio waves, assuming extraterrestrial civilizations employ technology comparable to mid-20th century Earth communications. This assumption is a direct consequence of the Drake equation's focus on technological civilizations capable of interstellar signaling. However, as physicist Michio Kaku often posits, a civilization even a few thousand years ahead of us might have completely abandoned radio waves, considering them an inefficient, energy-intensive, and easily intercepted primitive method. A civilization operating at a higher technological maturity, perhaps aligned with the hypothetical Kardashev Type 2 or 3, might utilize far more potent or subtle communication vectors. Communication via tightly beamed, coherent beams of high-energy photons, perhaps in the gamma-ray or X-ray spectrum, would be incredibly difficult to distinguish from natural astrophysical phenomena without prior knowledge of the signal structure. More radically, highly advanced entities might exploit fundamental physics in ways we are only beginning to theorize. Neutrinos, ghostly particles that interact only via the weak nuclear force and gravity, pass through planets and stars unimpeded. While generating a coherent, modulated beam of neutrinos requires immense energy and technological sophistication, perhaps harnessing the power of a stellar core, a signal transmitted via neutrinos would be virtually undetectable by conventional means and impossible to block, ensuring that the message would arrive intact across vast cosmic distances. If aliens communicate this way, our current listening posts are effectively deaf to them, our SETI efforts perpetually tuned to the wrong frequency band of the universe's electromagnetic and particle spectrum. Furthermore, the search must account for the temporal decoupling inherent in interstellar distances. The light, or any signal, we receive from a star system 50 light-years away is information from 50 years in the past. A civilization broadcasting powerful radio signals today might have already collapsed, transitioned to post-biological existence, or moved their energy focus to entirely different communication modalities within that 50-year window. Therefore, our search is not just for what they communicate with, but when they were in their technological prime relative to our own limited observational window. The evolutionary pathways leading to intelligence, even if the resulting life is radically different, must still navigate the problem of complexity and energy throughput. On Earth, the development of complex, multicellular life required a protracted period of atmospheric oxygenation, driven by early photosynthetic microbes, a planetary-scale engineering feat achieved over billions of years. Any alien world must have undergone its own similarly protracted, specific environmental evolution to support complex structures. For example, on a planet orbiting an M-dwarf star, which are the most common stellar type, the habitable zone is very close to the star, leading to tidal locking, where one side perpetually faces the star and the other is locked in eternal night. Life here might be confined to a narrow, terminator zone, a ring of perpetual twilight. Organisms in the hot zone might evolve mechanisms to dissipate massive heat loads, perhaps utilizing highly volatile internal fluids or developing vast surface areas for radiative cooling. Creatures in the cold zone might be extremely slow metabolizing cryophiles, relying on geothermal vents or capturing minute amounts of energy leaking around the terminator boundary. Intelligence in such a bifurcated world might develop along radically different lines, perhaps one form of intelligence adapted to the rapid energy capture near the star, and another adapted to long-term information storage and deep temporal reasoning in the cold dark. Their communication might be based on slow, complex patterns of seismic vibration across the planet's crust, a geological language impervious to the harsh stellar flares common to M-dwarfs. The concept of life itself becomes fluid under this scrutiny. If we encounter a self-replicating, evolving entity that manipulates energy and matter on a planetary scale, perhaps an alien terraforming mechanism that rearranges planetary crust to maximize solar collection, should we classify it as life? It adheres to the principles of evolution and persistence, yet lacks the cellular structure and metabolic chemistry we deem essential. This blurs the line between biology and sophisticated, self-directed technology. If a robotic swarm, designed by an extinct biological race, continues to self-repair, gather resources, and evolve its algorithms over billions of years, is it alive? This is the information-theoretic definition of life taking precedence over the substrate-specific one. The implications for abiogenesis, the process by which life arises from non-living matter, are equally vast. Current terrestrial models often focus on the RNA world hypothesis, where RNA molecules serve both as information carriers and rudimentary catalysts before the advent of DNA and complex proteins. But on a world with different temperatures, pressures, and solvent systems, the initial chemical replicator might be entirely different. It could be a self-organizing crystal structure, or perhaps a stable, complex vortex in a liquid medium, exhibiting emergent complexity. The study of complex systems chemistry is now yielding insights into non-equilibrium thermodynamics, where systems spontaneously organize themselves into lower entropy states locally by exporting entropy to the environment, the very hallmark of life. When these systems become sufficiently complex to exhibit heritable variation and selection, the transition from non-life to life is achieved, regardless of whether the molecules involved are carbon-based or not. The search for life is thus fundamentally a search for complexity maintained far from thermodynamic equilibrium. The data streaming in from missions like the James Webb Space Telescope, analyzing the atmospheres of rocky exoplanets in the habitable zones of distant stars, is providing the statistical groundwork for this expansion of expectation. As we characterize dozens, then hundreds, of exoplanetary atmospheres, the discovery of truly anomalous, unexplained chemical imbalances, molecules that should not coexist in vast quantities without a constant biological or technological throughput, will provide the first undeniable clues that our definition of life must expand. Perhaps we will find atmospheres rich in highly reactive elemental chlorine compounds alongside complex organic aerosols on a world orbiting a quiet red dwarf, a configuration impossible under known abiotic equilibrium chemistry. In conclusion, the compelling, yet parochial, image of the alien derived from human storytelling, the little green men, the insectoid conquerors, the benevolent humanoids, serves as a useful narrative device but a catastrophic scientific placeholder. The universe, operating under the same physical laws we observe, possesses an infinity of chemical and energetic possibilities that dwarf the narrow parameters of Earth's relatively mild conditions. Extraterrestrial life, if it exists in abundance, is statistically likely to be exotic, perhaps crystalline entities swimming in hot silicon oceans, slow-moving chemical machines navigating cryogenic methane seas, or even purely informational entities existing as self-aware patterns within cosmic data structures. Our greatest challenge is not merely finding a signal, but cultivating the philosophical and scientific flexibility to recognize life when it presents itself in a guise utterly foreign to our terrestrial, carbon-water prejudice. As Carl Sagan eloquently warned, the varieties of possible life in the universe exceed our imagination, and our current scientific methods, focused narrowly on Earth analogues, may be missing the vast, strange majority of biological reality unfolding across the cosmos. The true alien is not merely a different shape, it is a fundamentally different mode of existence, demanding a complete overhaul of our most cherished definitions of what it means to be alive.